One moment changed everything. Maria Torres didn't know that the tray of orange juice she was carrying up the marble staircase that morning would end her old life completely. She didn't know that a locked penthouse door, an off-limits hotel suite, and a voice she wasn't supposed to hear would put her right in the middle of a secret that could destroy one of the wealthiest families in the country. All she knew, standing outside that door with her hand frozen on the handle, was that some things, once you see them, you can never unsee. Hey, before we dive into today's story, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we tell real, emotional, heart-touching stories about ordinary people caught in extraordinary moments. Stories about loyalty, truth, and the quiet courage it takes to do the right thing when everything is on the line. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? Now, get comfortable because this story about a hard-working maid, a powerful billionaire, and a secret that was never supposed to come out, is one you will not forget. Let's begin. Nobody in Boston ever expected the Whitfield mansion to need a new housekeeper on such short notice. Maria Torres had been working 2 jobs for 3 years. Mornings cleaning offices downtown, evenings waitressing at a diner on the edge of town, when the agency called and told her about an opening at the Whitfield estate. She almost didn't believe it. The Whitfields were old money turned new money, their names stitched into half the skyscrapers in the city. Daniel Whitfield, the 34-year-old CEO who had taken his father's failing construction company and turned it into a billion-dollar empire, was practically a local legend. Rumor was he still remembered the names of every employee's children. Maria needed the job badly. Her son Eli was 7 years old and had a heart condition that required careful monitoring and, soon, a surgery that her insurance wouldn't fully cover. Every extra dollar mattered. So when she walked through the wrought iron gates of the Whitfield estate for her first day, her hands trembling slightly around the handle of her worn tote bag, she promised herself she would do everything right. No mistakes, no trouble, just work and a paycheck and a little more hope for her son. The house staff welcomed her warmly. The head housekeeper, an older woman named Renata who had worked for the family for almost 20 years, showed her around the sprawling estate. The 12-bedroom main house, the indoor pool, the private theater, the garden that looked like something out of a postcard. "Mr. Whitfield is a good man," Renata told her on that first walk. "Firm but fair. He notices things other rich men don't. Just do your job well and you'll be fine here." Maria noticed something else too, though nobody said it directly. A certain tension whenever Isabella Cross's name came up. Isabella was Daniel's fiancée. Beautiful, sharp-tongued, always dressed like she just stepped off a magazine cover. She was the daughter of a real estate mogul and had been engaged to Daniel for 8 months. Their wedding, set for the fall, at a vineyard estate 2 hours outside the city, was already the talk of Boston's high society pages. On paper they were the perfect couple. Successful, attractive, photogenic. But Maria had grown up around wealthy families before, cleaning their houses, catching the small cracks nobody else saw. And within her first 2 weeks at the estate, she began to notice things that didn't sit right. Isabella rarely looked at the staff. She spoke to Maria and the others only when giving orders, never once asking a name. She took calls in rooms with the doors locked, lowering her voice the moment anyone walked by. And more than once, Maria caught her checking her phone with an expression that didn't match a woman 4 months from her wedding. Not excitement, not nervousness, but something closer to guilt. Daniel, on the other hand, treated the staff with a warmth that surprised Maria. On her 3rd week, when he learned through Renata that Maria's son had a heart condition, he quietly arranged for the estate's car service to be available if she ever needed to rush to the hospital. He never mentioned it to her directly. He just made sure it was there. "He's a good man," Renata said again one evening, almost like a warning. "Better than he needs to be, given who he's marrying." Maria didn't ask what she meant. She had learned a long time ago that in houses like this, the walls had more secrets than the people did, and it was safer not to go looking for them. But then came the assignment that would change everything. One Thursday morning, Renata handed Maria a set of keycards and a folded note. Mrs. Cross, that was what the staff had started calling Isabella, even though the wedding hadn't happened yet, needs the penthouse suite at the Lindenhall Hotel prepared and cleaned before 11. She's going there for a spa weekend. Private housekeeping only. She was very specific. No hotel staff, only our people. You're the only one available this morning. Maria nodded, taking the keys without thinking twice. It was just another task. Just another door to open. Another room to make perfect for a woman who wouldn't even remember her name. She had no idea that behind that door was a truth that Isabella Cross had worked very, very hard to keep hidden, and that in less than an hour, Maria would become the one person standing between that secret and the man who trusted her most. The Lindenhall Hotel sat in the heart of downtown Boston, its penthouse floor reserved for people whose names never appeared on a guest registry. Maria arrived a little after 9. Her cart of cleaning supplies rattling softly in the private elevator reserved for penthouse staff. She had been told the suite would be empty. Isabella wasn't due to arrive until later that afternoon, and Maria's job was simply to make sure everything was spotless and ready before then. Fresh linens, champagne on ice, flowers arranged exactly the way Isabella liked them, always white roses, never anything else. As the elevator doors opened, Maria noticed something odd right away. The "Do Not Disturb" sign was already hanging on the door handle. She frowned, checking the note in her hand again. Renata had told her the suite would be unoccupied. Maybe housekeeping from the day before hadn't removed the sign. She knocked softly, just in case, waited a few seconds, heard nothing, and let herself in with a keycard. The suite was dim, curtains drawn halfway. The air smelling faintly of expensive cologne that didn't belong to anyone Maria had ever smelled in that house. She began her routine quietly, checking the bathroom, replacing towels, moving toward the bedroom to change the sheets, when she heard it. A man's laugh. Whoa. Familiar in tone, but not a voice she recognized. Maria froze in the hallway, her heart suddenly loud in her own ears. She told herself it was probably a television left on. But then came Isabella's voice, soft and unmistakable, laughing back. "She's not supposed to be here until this afternoon," Maria whispered to herself, gripping the handle of her cart. Every instinct told her to turn around, to leave quietly and pretend she'd never come in at all. This wasn't her business. Whatever was happening behind that door, it wasn't her place to see it. But her feet didn't move fast enough. Before Maria could retreat, a door down the hallway creaked open, and Isabella stepped out in a silk robe, laughing at something over her shoulder, her hair still slightly messed, a champagne glass loose in her hand. For one full second, the two women simply stared at each other. Isabella's face went through 3 expressions in the span of a heartbeat: surprise, then panic, then something colder, more calculating. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Renata sent me. I was told to prepare the suite for. I didn't ask for housekeeping today." Isabella's eyes darted behind her, toward the bedroom, where the shape of a man could be seen moving, unaware yet of the disruption. "Get out. Now." Maria didn't need to be told twice. She backed toward the door, her hands trembling around the handle of her cart, her mind spinning too fast to fully process what she had just seen. But even in that chaos, one image burned itself into her memory: the man's silhouette. Dark-haired, wearing a watch Maria recognized, because she had polished a matching one a dozen times in Daniel Whitfield's own dressing room. It wasn't Daniel. Maria made it into the hallway before Isabella caught up to her, grabbing her arm with a grip far stronger than her elegant appearance suggested. "Listen to me very carefully," Isabella said, her voice low and dangerous now, all pretense of sweetness gone. "Whatever you think you saw nothing. Do you understand me? Nothing. I wasn't trying to. I don't care what you were trying to do." Isabella's eyes were like ice now, calculating, already 3 steps ahead. "You have a job at that house because I allow it. You have a paycheck because Daniel is generous, and generous men are easy to manipulate, especially when someone they trust starts telling them lies. I wouldn't lie, Maria said quietly. But I also won't lie for you. Something flickered across Isabella's face. Surprise, maybe, that a maid would speak to her that way. She let go of Maria's arm, straightening her robe, composing herself with frightening speed. You have a sick son, don't you? Isabella said suddenly, her voice softening into something far more menacing than her anger had been. Heart condition. Needs surgery. That's expensive, isn't it? Careers can end quickly in this city, Maria. Reputations too. Think very carefully about what you say, and to whom, when you leave this room. Maria's blood ran cold. She said nothing. She simply turned, walked back into the elevator, and pressed the button with a shaking hand, the doors closing on Isabella's cold, satisfied stare. By the time Maria reached the ground floor, her mind was racing through a single, impossible question, one that would haunt every decision she made for the next several days. What do you do when the truth could save a good man's life, but telling it could destroy your own? Maria didn't sleep that night. She sat at her small kitchen table long after Eli had gone to bed, staring at her phone, replaying the moment over and over. Isabella's robe, the man's silhouette, the cold threat wrapped in a question about her son's surgery. She thought about calling Renata. She thought about quitting the job altogether, pretending she'd never taken the assignment. She thought more than once about simply saying nothing and letting the wedding happen, because what business was it of hers what rich people did behind closed doors? But then she thought about Daniel, the quiet car service he'd arranged without ever mentioning it, the way he greeted every member of the staff by name, the warmth in his eyes when Renata once told him Maria's boy loved trucks, and 2 days later a small toy fire engine appeared, wrapped, with no note attached. He was, Maria realized, exactly the kind of man who deserved to know the truth. And exactly the kind of man who would be devastated by it. The days that followed were tense. Isabella began finding reasons to appear wherever Maria was working. The kitchen, the laundry room, the hallway outside Daniel's study. Always with the same look, a silent reminder wrapped in a pleasant smile. Once, she accidentally mentioned in front of the entire staff that she had heard rumors about a housekeeper stealing from a previous employer. Her eyes flicking toward Maria the entire time, though she never said a name. The message was clear enough. Maria kept her head down, did her work, said nothing. But she began, quietly, to pay closer attention. She noticed that Isabella's spa weekends happened almost every other week, always at hotels, always with private staff only, always paid for on a card that wasn't Daniel's. She noticed the way Isabella's phone was never far from her hand, always face down on tables, always locked with a code she guarded carefully. She noticed a name that came up more than once in hushed hallway calls. Marcus. She noticed the watch again. The second time she happened to see a photograph in Isabella's dressing room of Isabella at some charity gala, standing a little too close to a tall, dark-haired man Maria now recognized without question. Marcus Rain. Maria learned his name completely by accident, overhearing Isabella on the phone through a cracked door one evening. Marcus Rain, it turned out, was the son of one of Boston's other prominent real estate families. And more importantly, Isabella's college boyfriend, the man she had reportedly been engaged to years before meeting Daniel. Maria didn't tell anyone what she knew. Not yet. She was afraid, genuinely afraid, of what Isabella might do if she spoke too soon, without proof, without protection. A word against a Whitfield fiancé, spoken by a maid with no evidence, could end in exactly the outcome Isabella had threatened. A ruined reputation, a lost job, no income for Eli's surgery, and worse, the very real possibility that no one would believe her at all. So Maria did the only thing she could think to do. She started paying very close attention, and she started keeping quiet, careful notes. Dates, times, things she overheard, nothing dramatic, nothing that could be traced back to her directly. Just enough that if the moment ever came, she wouldn't be standing there with nothing but her word against a woman who lied as easily as she breathed. She had no idea that Isabella, watching her from across every room now, had already begun making plans of her own. Plans to make sure that if anyone was going to be discredited before this wedding, it wouldn't be her. It happened on a Tuesday, exactly 9 days after the hotel. Maria arrived for her shift to find Renata waiting for her at the staff entrance, her face pale, her hands twisting together the way they always did when something was wrong. "There's a problem," Renata said quietly, pulling Maria aside before she could even set down her bag. "Mrs. Cross says a bracelet is missing from her dressing room. Diamond, very expensive. She says it disappeared sometime this week. And she's telling Mr. Whitfield's assistant that you were the last person cleaning that room." Maria's stomach dropped. "I never touched her jewelry. I don't even go near it. You know that, Renata, you trained me yourself. Everything in that room, I dust around it, I never move it." "I know." Renata's voice was low, urgent. "I believe you. But belief isn't proof. And Mrs. Cross has already spoken to security. They're going to want to search your bag, your locker, possibly even your apartment if this escalates. Maria, I think this is about more than a bracelet." Maria closed her eyes, the truth settling over her like a stone. Of course it wasn't about a bracelet. This was Isabella's answer to 9 days of Maria's silence. 9 days that Isabella clearly hadn't trusted to stay silent forever. This was a warning and a plan wrapped into one. Discredit the maid before the maid could ever open her mouth. Who would believe a thief? Security did search her bag that morning, in front of half the household staff, Isabella watching from the top of the staircase with an expression of practiced concern that made Maria's skin crawl. They found nothing, of course, because there was nothing to find. But the damage had already been done. Whispers moved through the staff quarters by lunchtime, the kind of whispers that don't need proof to spread, only suspicion. Daniel wasn't home that day, away at a business conference in Chicago, unaware that his own household was quietly tearing itself apart in his absence. That evening, Maria sat with Renata in the small staff kitchen, the older woman's face heavy with worry. "I've worked in this house for almost 20 years, Renata said finally. "And I've never seen Isabella Cross behave this way over a piece of jewelry that will turn up in her own drawer within the week." "Maria, what happened at that hotel?" Maria hesitated only a moment before she told her everything. "The sweep, the man, the threat." Renata listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every detail, until finally she sat back in her chair and let out a long, slow breath. "You have to tell him," Renata said quietly. "Not for revenge. Not even for the bracelet. For him, Maria. He deserves to know what kind of woman he's about to marry. And if he doesn't believe me, if it's my word against hers, and she's already planted the idea that I'm a thief before I've even said a word." Maria's voice cracked slightly. "I have a son who needs surgery in 6 weeks, Renata. I can't afford to lose this job over an accusation I can't prove." Renata reached across the table and took Maria's hand. "Then we get proof," she said simply, quietly, carefully, "before she gets the chance to bury you first." That night, for the first time, Maria stopped being afraid and started being determined. If Isabella wanted a war fought in silence and shadows, then Maria would learn to fight it exactly that way. Patiently, carefully, and without a single mistake she couldn't afford to make. Over the following 2 weeks, Maria became something she never imagined she'd have to be. Careful, watchful, quietly gathering the truth one small piece at a time. She didn't go looking for trouble. She didn't sneak through drawers or read private messages. Instead, she simply paid attention to what was already happening in plain sight, the way she always had, except now she understood the importance of remembering it. She noted the dates Isabella left for her spa weekends. She noted the name of the driver Isabella always requested, never the estate's usual car service, always a private car that Renata quietly confirmed was billed to a separate account Daniel didn't know existed. She noted a florist's delivery box, addressed not to the Whitfield estate but to a name Maria didn't recognize, left carelessly on a side table for an hour before Isabella's assistant rushed to remove it. Renata helped where she could, cross-referencing scheduling records, staff logs, delivery receipts. Nothing invasive, nothing illegal, just the ordinary paperwork of running a large household, examined now with new eyes. Slowly, a picture began to form. Isabella hadn't just had one indiscretion at a hotel. The relationship with Marcus Rain, it seemed, had never actually ended. Not when Isabella got engaged to Daniel, and perhaps not ever. The spa weekends, the private car, the separate account, all of it pointed toward a pattern too consistent, too practiced, to be anything but deliberate. Still, Maria hesitated to go to Daniel directly. Every instinct told her that a story this serious, aimed at a man this powerful, needed to be airtight before she spoke a single word. Because Isabella Cross had already proven she was willing to burn Maria's entire life down to protect her secret, and Maria couldn't risk giving her a second chance to do it more successfully. The bracelet, predictably, turned up a week later found, according to Isabella, wedged behind her dresser the whole time. She made a small show of apologizing to the household staff for the inconvenience, though her eyes never once met Maria's during the apology. The message beneath the words was clear. I can do this again any time I want. It was around this time that Maria noticed something that made her chest tighten with a very different kind of fear. Daniel himself had begun to change. He was quieter at dinner, distracted during meetings that used to energize him. Twice, Maria overheard him asking his assistant, in a careful, measured voice, why certain hotel charges kept appearing on an account he didn't remember approving. Once, she saw him standing in the hallway outside Isabella's dressing room for a long moment, simply staring at the closed door, before he turned and walked away without going in. He was starting to notice, too. Maybe not the whole truth, not yet, but enough small wrong pieces to feel that something in his life had quietly shifted out of place. Maria realized, with a mixture of dread and clarity, that time was running out. If Daniel discovered the truth on his own, piece by piece, without context, without someone to help him understand the full picture, the damage might be even worse. The wedding might still happen out of confusion or doubt, and Isabella might find a way to explain it all away before he ever saw clearly. The truth needed to come from somewhere solid, somewhere undeniable. And soon, Maria realized with a chill, it might have to come from her. Isabella struck first, harder this time, and with far less subtlety. It began with a phone call to the agency that had placed Maria at the estate, a call Maria only learned about when the agency's director showed up unannounced one morning, asking to speak with her privately. Isabella, it turned out, had filed a formal complaint, not about missing jewelry this time, but about inappropriate conduct, a vague and damaging accusation claiming Maria had been overheard spreading malicious rumors about the household to other staff members. There was no evidence, of course, because there was nothing to find. But the accusation alone was enough to trigger a formal review, enough to put Maria's employment, and by extension her ability to pay for Eli's surgery, into sudden jeopardy. "She's trying to get you removed before you can say anything," Renata said grimly, once the agency director had left. "She knows you know something. She's not waiting to find out what. She's making sure you're gone before it matters." Maria felt something shift inside her that day. Not panic, but a hard, clear resolve. She had spent weeks being careful, patient, quiet, hoping to avoid confrontation. But Isabella had made it clear that patience wasn't going to protect her. Only the truth could do that now, delivered at the right moment to the right person, with everything Maria and Renata had quietly gathered laid out plainly. That night, Maria sat with Renata and, for the first time, with James, Daniel's longtime driver and one of the few staff members who had worked for the family even longer than Renata had. James had noticed his own strange details over the years. Private cars booked outside the estate system, hotel destinations that never matched Isabella's stated plans, a name, Marcus Rain, that had come up more than once in overheard conversations he'd never thought much of until now. Together, the three of them laid out everything they knew. It wasn't a courtroom case. It wasn't perfect. But it was consistent, corroborated from multiple angles, and far more than simple hearsay. Dates that lined up, an account that didn't belong to Daniel, a driver's records, a maid's first-hand account of what she'd walked in on at the Lindenhall Hotel. "If we go to him now," James said slowly, "and we're wrong about any of it, we could lose our jobs, all three of us. Maybe worse. And if we don't go to him," Maria said quietly, "and he marries her anyway, not knowing, what happens to him then?" Nobody had an answer for that. But nobody needed one either. They all understood without saying it aloud what the right choice was, even if it was the harder one. The decision was made that night. They would find a way to bring the truth to Daniel Whitfield, carefully, respectfully, but honestly. Not as an accusation, but as information he had every right to have before he spent the rest of his life bound to a woman who had never stopped lying to him. They didn't yet know that Daniel wouldn't need convincing for long, because 2 days later, he would see something with his own eyes that would make every piece of Maria's careful evidence suddenly, painfully clear. Daniel Whitfield had built his entire empire on one simple principle: trust but verify. It was a lesson his father had taught him young, back when Whitfield Construction was still a small operation clawing its way through competitive city contracts. "Trust your people," his father used to say, "but always check the numbers yourself." Daniel had applied that principle to every business deal he'd ever made. He had simply never thought to apply it to his own engagement. That changed the week the hotel statement arrived on his desk by mistake. It was a small clerical error. A joint account statement meant for his private financial advisor, redirected instead to his main office inbox. Daniel almost didn't open it. He almost let his assistant forward it along without a second look. But something, a habit built over 15 years of reading fine print, made him pause on the recurring charges from the Lindenhall Hotel, a property he had personally never once stayed at, billed to an account tied to Isabella's name. He told himself there was an explanation. There always was with these things. Maybe it was a work retreat. Maybe it was a spa package with friends. He almost convinced himself of it entirely, until he remembered, with a small, cold jolt, standing in the hallway outside Isabella's dressing room weeks earlier, staring at a closed door, feeling something he couldn't name at the time. Daniel didn't confront her immediately. Instead, quietly, carefully, he did something he had never done in 8 months of engagement. He asked questions. He asked his assistant discreetly to pull the full history of the account. He asked James, his driver, in a casual tone that didn't fully mask the tension underneath, whether he'd ever taken Isabella anywhere unusual recently. James hesitated for a long moment before answering. "Sir, I think you should talk to Maria." "Maria? The housekeeper. She was sent to the Lindenhall a few weeks ago to prepare a suite. I think it's better if she tells you herself." Daniel found Maria in the laundry room later that afternoon, folding towels with the same careful precision she brought to everything. Her hands steady despite the exhaustion clearly written across her face. She looked up when he entered, and something in her expression, a flicker of fear quickly masked, told him before she said a single word that James had been right to send him here. "Maria," Daniel said gently, closing the door behind him, "I need you to tell me the truth about something. And I need you to know, whatever it is, you won't lose your job for telling me. I give you my word." Maria's hands stilled on the towel in front of her. For a long moment she said nothing, weighing 9 days of fear, threats, a false accusation about a bracelet, another false accusation meant to have her fired outright, weighing all of it against the quiet, steady sincerity in the eyes of the man standing in front of her, a man who had never once, in months of working in his house, given her a single reason to doubt his character. "Mr. Whitfield," she said finally, her voice trembling only slightly, "I think you should sit down." Maria told him everything. She told him about the Lindenhall Hotel, the Do Not Disturb sign that shouldn't have been there, the man's laugh through the door, Isabella stepping out in a robe with her hair undone. She told him about the threat that followed, the mention of Eli's surgery, the cold, calculated warning wrapped inside a question. She told him about the missing bracelet that conveniently reappeared, about the false complaint to the agency, about the name that kept surfacing in quiet, overheard conversations. Marcus Rain. Daniel sat very still through all of it, his hands folded, his jaw tightening more with every detail, but he never once interrupted her, never once suggested she was lying or exaggerating. When she finished, the laundry room was silent except for the hum of the dryer beside them. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" he asked finally. His voice quiet, not accusing, genuinely asking. "Because I was afraid," Maria said honestly. "Because she made it very clear what would happen to me if I did. And because it wasn't my place to destroy something I couldn't prove, sir. I needed to be sure. I needed more than just my word." Daniel closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, something in his expression had hardened into a quiet, focused resolve Maria hadn't seen in him before. Not anger exactly, but the calm, deliberate look of a man who had just decided exactly what needed to happen next. "You're not going to lose your job," he said. "Not today, not ever over this. I promise you that." He paused. "And Maria, thank you. I know what it cost you to tell me this." That evening, Daniel confronted Isabella directly, not with accusations shouted across a room, but with the same calm, methodical approach he brought to every difficult negotiation in his career. He laid out the account statements. He laid out the driver's records. He mentioned quietly a name, Marcus Rain, and watched every trace of color drain from Isabella's face. She tried to deny it at first, then to minimize it. Then, when the details proved too specific and too consistent to explain away, she tried something else entirely. She turned on Maria. "She's lying," Isabella said, her voice climbing higher, more desperate. "She's a housekeeper, Daniel. She has every reason to make up stories, to try to get closer to this family too. She has photographs of hotel charges she was never given access to," Daniel said quietly. "She has account records she has no way of forging. She had every reason to say nothing at all and protect her own job. And instead she risked everything to tell me the truth, even after you threatened her son's medical care to keep her quiet." Isabella went very still at that. "You threatened a mother's sick child," Daniel said, his voice dropping even lower, "to protect an affair you've apparently been carrying on since before you ever agreed to marry me." He shook his head slowly, something in his eyes closing off entirely, a door shutting for good. "I don't think I know who you are at all." The engagement ended that same week, quietly at first, and then, inevitably, not quietly at all. Boston's social circles moved fast when it came to gossip involving names like Whitfield and Cross, and within days the story had spread far beyond the estate's gates. Isabella's own family, embarrassed by the scandal and unwilling to be associated with the fallout, distanced themselves from her almost immediately. The Vineyard wedding, once the most anticipated event on the city's social calendar, was quietly, permanently cancelled. Isabella tried briefly to salvage her public image, a carefully worded statement to a local society magazine calling the split a private matter mutually decided. But the truth, once it starts moving through a city like Boston, rarely stays contained for long. Details emerged. The hotel. The account. The name Marcus Rain, who it turned out had his own long, complicated history of similar entanglements. Within a month, Isabella Cross had quietly left the city altogether. Her engagement, her reputation, and her carefully built image among Boston's elite all unraveling together. Maria, meanwhile, found herself facing a very different kind of change. Daniel called a meeting with the entire household staff the following week, not to announce anything about the broken engagement, which he handled with quiet dignity and no public blame directed at anyone but Isabella herself, but to address something else entirely. He stood in front of Renata, James, Maria, and the rest of the staff and thanked them sincerely for something he said he would never forget. "Loyalty isn't about telling people what they want to hear," he said. "It's about telling them the truth, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something." I found that kind of loyalty in this house, from people who had every reason to stay quiet and protect themselves instead. I won't forget that. He didn't single Maria out in front of the others. He understood without being told that she wouldn't want the attention. But later that day, he asked her to come to his office, where he told her, quietly and without ceremony, that Eli's surgery would be fully covered, arranged through the estate's private medical fund that Daniel personally oversaw for long-serving staff, a fund Maria hadn't even known existed until that moment. "This isn't charity," he said when she tried to protest, her eyes filling with tears she couldn't hold back. "This is what happens when someone tells the truth, even when it would have been so much easier not to. I take care of the people who take care of this family. You did that, Maria. More than you know." 6 months later, Eli Torres ran across the Whitfield estate's back lawn with a fire truck toy clutched in one hand, laughing so hard he nearly tripped over his own feet, a sound Maria had once feared she might never hear again, back when heart surgeries and hospital bills felt like impossible mountains standing between her son and a normal, happy childhood. The surgery had gone perfectly. Eli's recovery, according to his doctors, had exceeded every expectation. And Maria, watching her son run freely across grass he never could have played on so easily before, felt something in her chest ease for the first time in years, the particular bone-deep relief of a mother whose child is finally truly safe. Maria still worked at the estate, though her role had changed in quiet, meaningful ways. Daniel had, over the following months, come to trust her judgment on more than just housekeeping, asking her opinion on staff matters, on household decisions, treating her, gradually, less like an employee and more like someone whose honesty he had learned, the hard way, to value above almost anything else. He never remarried quickly. Never rushed into anything resembling the relationship he'd nearly built his entire future on with Isabella Cross. But those who knew him well said he seemed lighter somehow, more himself, as though some quiet weight he hadn't even realized he was carrying had finally been lifted. As for Isabella, her name rarely came up anymore. A cautionary story now, whispered occasionally at Boston social events, about how quickly a carefully built image can collapse when the truth finally catches up to it. Maria never set out to become part of a story like this. She had only ever wanted to do her job well, to provide for her son, to stay quiet, stay safe, stay unnoticed in a world of wealth and power she'd never imagined she would be pulled into so completely. But in the end, it wasn't her silence that changed her life. It was her courage to speak, even when speaking was the harder, more frightening choice. If there's one thing this story leaves us with, it's this: the truth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it walks quietly through an open door, in the hands of someone the world barely notices. A housekeeper, a driver, an ordinary person who simply refuses to look away from what's right. And sometimes that one moment of courage is enough to change everything for everyone involved. If this story touched your heart today, we'd love for you to hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story like this one. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that honesty and courage always matter, no matter how small you feel, share this video with them. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.